Good evening, all of you. Hi, I'm David. Uh, this is actually a small introduction from Kottayam Nature Society. We've been doing this for past 2 weeks. I mean, we already done 15 different talks on different environmental subjects, and so it's actually started by two nature society. One called Kottayam Nature Society, and another one is Alapi Naturalistic Society, both based in Kerala. So they do a lot of groundwork for conservation. I mean, the major one they didn't actually when there's a huge island in the middle of Vembanad Lake. It's the largest lake in Kerala. So one of the big hotel group wanted to buy that land and buy resorts and all. So they fought. They went up to Supreme Court and got a stay. So that pristine island also got saved. So they do a lot of conservation work like that. And yeah, so today we have Dr. Rekhu. I mean, he don't need an introduction. He's done extensive studies on tigers and snow leopards. If the lockdown extend more, he'll come back again and talk to us about snow leopards and all. Uh, Thank you so much, sir, for agreeing to give a talk. And over to you.
Thank
Also,
you. Sorry.
sorry to butt in. If anyone have any questions, they can come in the chat box at the end of it. Then we can discuss there. That's better. Now we can take over from here.
Thank you, David. This is my first talk, first thing I'm doing on Zoom, so I'm not very good at it. But I hope everybody can hear me properly. After a brief introduction, I think, of the talk, and then I will switch off my video so that you could hear me properly, because the bandwidth here is not the greatest. So you have to bear with this. I will be talking about tigers at length, not so much its ecology or biology, but we will be looking at the conservation status and look at what direction we have to go if we want to save this species in a larger landscape than what we are able to do in last 4 to 5 decades. So I will be focusing on that, and I will start with a few introductory things which I think the conservation has suffered in the past, which we call a generational shift of understanding conservation issues. Um, but if you look at it, the success stories India um, is very diverse, very large and huge. If you look at where the successes are in the world, and if you look at India, India could be in top 10 countries. There is no doubt about it. But despite all the successes we had, um, somehow quite a lot of negativity is there about India, because the thing is that we have great successes, but we have also uh, quite a lot of things which we have not done right. So, look at the example of Panna. It had fantastic recovery program, great success stories, but Panna also had quite a disaster, uh, and that's why India is in a position where it is. But despite this, the number of success stories India has is quite encouraging. And snow leopard in these two pictures, which I happen to work with them very early in my career. I started with my career by starting my PhD program on snow leopard in Ladakh, and I started there working first with surveys in 1985. Started my PhD program in 86, end of 86, and which ended in 93. And then we continued to work in the Rumbak Valley. And it's been a great success story in Rumbak. Now you know, if you want to see snow leopards, people go to Rumbak. It didn't come out, happened very quickly. It took a long time. We used to go work there. We had several conservation programs, and then a local NGO started working there, and Rinchin was the man behind it. And then he extended the program to Ule, and now Ule is also another a place you can go and see snow leopards. And same is Kibber, there is a long conservation presence uh, program presence there. And for conservation, you need a dedicated work long term, 10, 15, 20 years. You can't go over 2 years and expect things to change. um, So snow leopard's been success, but more than snow leopard, as far as I'm concerned, the species which I'm really excited about is the recovery of Urials. Because when we were working, we were very pessimistic about its future. We thought we, in by the end of 2019, in the century, turn of the century, we may lose these Urial. Um, but I think Forest Department worked very hard, and especially it was related to poaching, and they managed to control it. And now what you see is very encouraging, and I'm really excited that we have brought this species. But again, now we're seeing some trouble for this species as the development in Ladakh is growing. Its habitat is going along the two major valleys, Indus and Shyok, and both are quite heavily habited as far as Ladakh densities are concerned, and it has its impact because they don't go very far up and in deep into the side valleys. They restrict, and there is an ecological reason why they do it. Um, but that may be something when, if we have time to talk about Ladakh, we will do it. But these are some of the success stories I will be referring to. Again, Red Panda, fantastic work by Sunita Pradhan. We hardly know about, hear about it, we read about her work, and it's been very long time she had done, how the individuals were introduced, colored work, disappointments, and it's now been, after maybe 20 years, it's been now a place to go and see, photograph, enjoy watching pandas. Recovery of Panna, I have talked about, Amur Falcon, Silent. So the success stories are, you can go on and on. And one of my favorite is recovery of pygmy hawk. So I think there are very few examples in the world um, like this, and what they have done, I think it's one of the highlight of success stories in India. But what happens is that tiger is such an iconic species that it overwhelms all the success stories, conservation success stories, and it's kind of sad in a way that it takes all the attention. Um, but it is an important species because it's a key mm, what you call keystone species for the largest nature habitat in India. So it's kind of I'm not doing these lines, but I don't know how it's happening. Um, but I will be talking about tigers and how much success we have achieved. Um, the um, the story, conservation story of tigers is very long. Um, but if you look at it legally, if you look in our generations, it started from where we formulated Wildlife Protection Act, created Project Tiger, established tiger reserves. Um, but the problem with this conservation program is that we completely dependent on one conservation model, and that's the protected area based model. We have set aside an area, um, removed all the problems from there, hoping it will work, and it has worked. But it's worked within the boundaries of the protected areas, and I think it's time that we need to move on from that, because what had happened is that we're so dependent on this one conservation model, and we are still not able to bring the tigers out of its troubled waters. So it is still facing threats, and we need to address those issues. If you look at what are the what what are the issues that protected areas are not able to address, um, if you look at, and most of them are related to work needed to be done outside the protected area boundary. One is like range restriction. So you have protected a tiger area habitat, but it's allowed it the range reduction. So the range continues to contract, and now only 7% of its original habitat is. So if you look at last census data, which is 2014, we have access to almost 80% of the tigers are found within our tiger reserves and protected areas. And if you include buffer zone, then that percentage is even higher. So we are not able to address this issue. And it's a very, very significant issue because range restriction is the first sign of extinction. So it's a big threat. And if we want to bring the tigers out of troubled waters, we need to extend its range. That means we have to go beyond the boundaries of protected areas. And how are we going to do that? That's a challenge we have. Then we look at populations. We have, again, protected populations, but they are fragmented, they are small, they are isolated, connectivity is poor. So all these things are has to be worked outside our boundaries, not within the protected areas, can help solve this problem. Then protected areas, most of the protected areas individually are not viable, demographically viable, forget genetic viability. So that's again we need to work on, because we may not have enough um, amount of space to keep a viable population within those boundaries. So then how we can make the individual population viable is the key. Then poaching uh, causes an extinction threat. Quite a lot of it happens outside the protected areas, where animals go outside um, in the corridor areas, get killed. So that again has to be addressed outside. Loss of habitat and habitat quality, um, because wildlife conservation reach is limited to the boundaries. We have not put much attention on the habitat outside, and the quality of habitat is declining. Not so much habitat now, but we're losing habitat in from the development activities like dams and things like that, and that we need to address that also. Genetics, again, it's to do with some of the viability issues, size of the populations, connectivities, and that's again outside the boundaries. We have to work to address this. Biotic pressure, again, it's mostly we have removed from the within the boundaries, but outside still exists. So it's surrounded by those pressures. So we need to address that. The community support, which resides outside in tiger habitat, but not getting the benefit of conservation, and hence we have not managed to uh, garner that support. And the problem with that is that because the community participation for conservation we have left on voluntary basis. Outside protected areas, we tell it's good for ecology, it's good for this, moral, ethical reasons, and people have to participate on voluntary basis. That's not worked, and we need to change that. And how we can do that, we will all discuss this in this next 30-40 minutes. Now, David, can I ask you to remove some of those things because I can't read little on the top? If you, uh, is it
Uh,
possible?
I think, sir, that will be 1 second. That will be there, sir.
Okay, no, don't not to worry then. So when I was talking about that every generations we lose certain baseline and understanding our conservation issues, and in the science we generally refer it as a conservation amnesia. It's a syndrome of shifting baselines, and because with every generation the baseline shift, and that's it's a serious challenge for conservation planning, because at the turn of the previous century, we had more than 40,000 tigers. Then when we launched our tiger project, it was around 2,500. And then the first 4 year annual yearly census was done. It brought down to 1,400. That's now become a new baseline. And I think we need to, as a conservationist, we need to look at it with a greater perspective and long-term perspective, because these are used very cleverly by people to create certain kind of perceptions, and that's how it happens. So when the prime minister released the report, the baseline all of a sudden shifted from late 70s or early 80s, when we had 25 to 1800 to 2500 tigers, to 1400 tigers. And so in 10 years time, 10 12 years time, we're saying that we have doubled the tiger numbers. um, and so according to them, bago mein bahar hai. It's kind of very sad to see, because if you look at the numbers very carefully, we don't have enough information. It is not provided in our data, in the reports which they have. If I go back in these reports, they have not provided us enough information to be, for me, to be sure that there were 1,400 tigers. There may be 200, 2,000 tigers or 2,200 tigers were there. The thing is that when we did first estimates, we didn't cover the entire India, but we reported the figure as it was for the entire India. Then we increased it, the area of coverage, because of our ability. We had much more trained manpower. We had some experience, so we covered a larger area, and hence the number. It went on to 1,700, and then we again covered most of the India in 2010. The figure was about 2,700. And when we did the census, the area couldn't be increased, but we then added some extra numbers by changing the adult definition of the adult tigers. So the younger tigers were added to the adult tigers, so maybe around 200. But if you look at, in terms of the perspective of conservationists who started this career in 70s and 80s, when the world when was told that we have 2,500 tigers, it shocked the world. The world came together and provided support to India. India launched um, Project Tigers. New Wildlife Act was formulated and launched, and it was a shock for everybody. But now, with few hundred tigers, maybe from 2,500 to 2,700 tigers, we're celebrating. It's a huge, huge success for us. And in fact, people are going a step forward and creating a different perception, that now India don't have space for tigers. And look at the language. What they say is that what will tiger lobby will do now. Um, it is it opens up door, because then now they can go and say that we don't need space for tigers. So these areas are open for many other things, which maybe say development activities and things like that. And we need to be very aware of these things, which how it happens. And these perceptions are created purposely, as far as I am concerned. And we need to be aware, careful. Everything which has been given to us, in this world we don't trust anything unless we go seriously in detail about these. And and that's what I wanted to bring, that the the success of for tigers in India is, for me, is not so much in the numbers, but on other things which we are able to achieve. So the debate for me is not that uh, about how many tigers we have, but the debate is between forest need tigers versus tiger need forest, because it's basically our conservation model that we are working. So the forest need tigers means it's an inclusive model, which that means that forest tiger adds value to the forest, and forest needs tigers to be healthy and for us. Um, an exclusive model, which is protected area based, which its in philosophy is based on that tiger needs forests, and we have to provide that space for tigers. And then we have created a conservation model around that philosophy. And we need, it may be a time, and it has been very, very successful. There's no doubt about it. When I'm talking about what perception has been created, it's been a great success story as far as tigers is concerned. But it's time that we have to build on those successes, because we have looked at what limitations of protected areas, and now the challenge is outside the protected areas, and that the model which we have is not will not work outside protected areas. So we need a parallel model that's complementary to existing models and works with a different philosophy. Because here people are living in the forest, they are on tigers to survive there, then we have to be inclusive. And so to change that, and then we need people participation, not by volunteer basis. It's a very passive way of dealing with the issues. We need people participation. So we have a conservation fence, then we want people on our side fighting the the challenges, not being on the other side of the fence, and we fight with people. It makes it much more difficult. And 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 I believe that Tiger can bring people on our side because it can add value, and can help rebuild the local economies, because the economies in the village in the tiger habitat is deteriorating very, very, very fast. Agriculture is not profitable. Minor forest produce-based economy is deteriorating. Labors have gone, and there is no skills available. There is no education in the. So how can you build local economies with the mainstream development model? Is not going to work. We need to rebuild economies. Tiger can bring this some kind of can be economic driver to rebuild these economies, and those economics has to be conservation based economy. And and we have looked at that the range restriction as one of the threat which we were talking about. As far as I am concerned, there are three major issues we need to deal if we want to save tigers. One of them is the range extension. So we have to reverse this trend. If we have to reverse this trend, if you look at we have plenty of spaces. So that perception which people generally making is completely wrong. That we don't have space. We have 300,000 square kilometer of tiger habitat, and that's the potential. And if you extrapolate the average densities which we have come up with these 4-yearly data collected over 15 years, you extrapolate that, we certainly should have had 15,000 to 20,000 tigers. But I will be very happy if we have 5,000 to 6,000 tigers, which is a realistic possibility. And then we have for that definitely large spaces to work on. But if you look at it, tiger distribution in this map, um, you see darker areas are the tiger reserves, and most of the distribution is around those tigers. And this is a distribution only, the presence of tigers. But if you look at numbers, 80% of them are within those darker areas. So they are only 20% in these large areas, larger, lighter green areas. So in terms of numbers, we have not done much. As far as I'm concerned, maybe a few hundred tigers from the time where we have started our tiger conservation in 80s to now. But what is the biggest conservation success story is from this Project Tiger is that it's able to protect its geographies. So it is, if you look at the old lighter gray is the distribution over 100 years ago, it is still occupying most of the range it has occupied in the past, and wherever still tiger habitat is intact, it is still present. And that's the biggest success stories as far as I'm concerned, because it allows us to look at the mushroom growth of in these every dot. It can allow us to expand the range uh, and make it much larger, dark, continuous green. That's a success story we need to build on, and we need to do it very quickly. And it's time that we need uh, change, not change, but we add new models to work on in parallel to what we've been doing so far, because it's been successful, and we don't want to stop that going. So what it needs is that we need to extend the reach of conservation beyond our boundaries. So we need models which allows conservation to happen outside the boundaries and build on the successes and take advantage of success stories, because they are very, very hard earned successes which we have earned. And and we need these models to run parallel and help make the protected populations even more viable. Uh, and when we started to work, I started work on tigers in 1994, thinking about doing a work. I was got involved in Ranthambore, where we were losing tigers, and then when I searched around literature, and then I realized most of the problems we're facing as far as tiger conservation population is that we're losing tigers in dry forest. And so we wanted to work on an habitat which is dry, and wanted to know why we are losing tigers in dry forest. And so I went to Panna. I had several uh, sites in my mind. Ranthambore was out of question because it was a very touristic place, and if I had radio collared tigers there, it would have been a serious problem. Uh, Pench and Tadoba was one of them. Uh, Tadoba and Pench both were not, and when I compared Panna, Panna has much um, a smaller population, lot more threats, but the area was suitable for tracking radio collar tigers, and that's one reason why I selected Panna and not Tadoba and Page. And then we were lucky to find this tiger we call Bawan. Uh, then one in the middle, which is eyebrows says 5 and 2. Um, so we call it 52, and in Hindi it was Bawan. So the tracking team used to call it Bawan. And that when we had collared, she had a litter of 3 females, and these are photographs at the bottom. And we were able to radio collar them, and then monitored them also. So we had 3 generations which we monitored, and we collected them in quite a valuable amount of data, and that most of it is published now in my book called Rise and Fall of Emerald Tigers. If anybody wants to go in more details, we can get this book. It's available on Amazon, and it discusses everything. But I will not go into detail all of it, but something which is relevant to this talk today. One of the things which we found was that the space need for tigers is 3 to 4 times larger than in other habitats like Nagarhole or Kana or Chitwan or Corbett. So the female ranges in Corbett or in Chitwan or Nagarhole or Kanha is about 15 to 20 square kilometers, whereas in Panna it was somewhere between uh, 45 to 60 square kilometers. So it's 3-4 times larger. And male ranges, largest male range in Chitwan was maybe about 100, 101. Panna it was over 170, and 1 year it was, if you look at the yearly, it was over 270 square kilometers. So very, very large home ranges of tigers. So that means they need larger spaces to for a demographically viable population to be protected in protected areas. But the problem what we had was that because the protected area is small, look at the average size of protected areas in dry forest is about 250, 270 square kilometers. So the space what we are providing in dry forest and also other habitats which are drier, which we will discuss a little later, the space needed for tigers is larger, and the space we're providing it for protection is small. And we we call it a scale mismatch, and that's a serious problem. And what it causes, what the impact of it is that it exposes the breeding population, the protected population, to age effect. So if you look at the home ranges, they all extend beyond the boundaries or extend up to the boundaries. And that's where the conflict is, that's where the threats are. And so we are exposing our breeding populations to those threats. And one reason what we saw was that we had very high female mortalities in a population like Panna, which is exposed to these age effects. So if you look at any population, carnivore population in the world, the mortality is usually high in adult male population. Female population usually is lower than the males, and it was opposite here. Um, the reason was my speculation is that the males, when they go out, there is a very high mortality in the younger adults, but the males who survive to adulthood, 5, 6, 7 years old, have had certain characteristics or acquired behaviors which can survive a human conflict situation. And when they come back as a dominant male, then they survive better. But the female has not gone through that kind of selection because they are philopatric in their behavior. So the female cubs will settle down somewhere near mother, and she has not gone through that. And they are exposed when they are exposed to this kind of threat. They are more as an adult, they are more vulnerable to that kind of mortalities, and that's why we have seen high female mortality, and that was a serious effect on the viability of population. So this will explain you why is that. So the circle and the is the same buffer areas, and the blue square is the core area. It's the actual same size. And in habitat, we have a smaller space requirement. You can accommodate a lot more breeding territories, whereas in areas where you need larger spaces, you cannot. And so a larger proportion of the breeding population is exposed to threat. And if those breeding territories experiences high mortalities, the the replacement recruitment is very poor, where it could be much faster because there is still a large number of territories still able to breed. And that's why when the poaching, maybe same number amount of tigers are killed in Panna and same amount of tigers killed in Kanha, you will see different population survival rates, because Panna will succumb to that, may succumb to that pressure, as we have seen in the past, where the tigers in Kanha, Panagar, Corbett, Nagahole to survive even that number of poaching. So we need uh, uh, to have a good balance between the breeding number populations to sustain those kind of mortalities. And when you have a scale mismatch, protected area is small. How are you going to do that? You can't expand the protected area size forever. So we need alternate models. And that's so the losses of Panna and Sariskas, if you look at it, they are not unique events in tiger history. Uh, they actually, if this graph actually shows it's a pan India trend. So you look at the the probability of extinction on the vertical axis and the protected area size. The size on its own is not uh, uh, going to cause extinction. But in max, one is in combination with the ecological requirement, then you have a problem. So say even 450 square kilometer of area in um, um, what you call grassland, alluvial grassland, Tarai forest, uh, the extinction probability is less than 10%. But if you go to rainforest areas, it may be about 15%. But the moment you go to tropical moist deciduous or drier forests or to tropical dry forests, then the probability is much larger. And in dry forest, which is almost 50% of the tiger habitat in India, the probability is about 60%, more than 60%. And if you see each square there, red square, is one protected area. And you see the density of protected area is much greater in the smaller size. So the average protected, so you have a lot more protected areas, which is built more less than 450. Now, we can't make them larger. So how can we reduce those probability of extinction? And that's something which we need to look at it. And for this, what we did based on our empirical data, we modeled populations and looked at it, what we needed. I will not go detail too much here, but if you look at it, if you look at the if almost sure short extinction, if in a population like Panna, if you are losing breeding females, one breeding female per year, then there is no chance tiger population will survive. But it reduces very drastically. If you have one breeding a female dying every 3 years, there is still fairly good chances of mortalities from extinction. But it kind of reduces when there is no poaching. Now, in a scale mismatch situation, you can provide protection within the boundaries, but outside the boundaries you can't. And when the breeding territory is extending beyond the boundaries, then there is a certain amount of poaching will be there, and then that conditions will not exist there. And if there is a random poaching of which includes breeding, non-breeding, then it can be sustained, but it's still there is a risk to population. So we looked at when we do have a scale mismatch situation where you have not enough protected areas, how the number of breeding territory, female territories will help us. And we look at the different breeding, um, very high mortality rates, one breeding females per year. And we looked at different scenarios where we had 12, uh, 7 breeding females, 10 breeding females, 12 breeding females, 15 breeding females. And then if you see, is if you have more than 13, 14 breeding females, then it can sustain that kind of a poaching. Now, the key is that Panna, with 450 square kilometer of area, can sustain about 7 or 8 breeding females. Now, another 6 or 7 where we can have to make this population viable, and that's the challenge, and that's where we need innovative ways of dealing with. But the unfortunate thing is that we have created buffers as a around our protected areas. And for me, is a flawed concept because it's not going to help. If we look at Panna example, and then we have created this buffer, and which has got villages, and legally we have created in such a way that the status quo will continue, and that's not going to solve the problem for tigers. Tigers comes outside. I get very worried when you hear a news that in a buffer area you see a female with cubs over a kill. It's a People get excited, but for me, it's a worry. The more time she spends in these habitats, there is high mortality because she is going through between two regimes of mortalities when it's protected inside the protected area, where is high chances of survival. When she goes outside the protected area, there is low mortality. So if you are many of your breeding tigers doing this, then the overall probability of survival will go down. If I have wanted to create a buffer, I will do completely differently. I may need maybe a very small ring around our protected area, but will be protected much more strong, maybe strongly than the core area. So I will have better protection levels in my buffer than the core area. It's like egg situation where you have a vulnerable core and it is protected by a hard shell. So we have to create that hard shell around our core areas. That's needed. But unfortunately, we have these buffer areas, and we need to find ways how we can make reduce mortalities of our breeding tigers there, and it needs some innovative approaches. Now, these are the areas where poaching happens. That's where the conflict range, um, and to generate goodwill for conservation is not an easy thing. I will not go into detail in the poaching right now, but the conflict, would like to make a point that generally people think conflict is really bad for tigers. But for me, if tiger has to survive outside our protected areas, it has to survive in conflict situation. So we have to really see how we can manage a situation for tigers. But the good thing is that where are the good practices where people can live with tigers without much problem? Um, and if you look at those places, those are the places where tiger has continued to survive. So in places where in Panna or other places I've seen where villages were inside, those days when villages were inside the tiger reserves, people lived quite happily for generations because they knew. And when we were doing some surveys, we were talking to some of these old people, 70 years old people, and there were few people who have never seen tiger in their lifetime, and they lived entirely surrounded by tigers. And I asked them why. He said, "Look, if we know the tigers on this side of the forest, we will not go. We will go somewhere else." Imagine a situation where tigers appears outside Nagpur or Bhopal. Half of the Bhopal city will turn up there, or half of the village will turn up now because tiger is novelty there now. So it is completely turned around. So the good practices were there because the tiger was present, and to minimize the conflict, there were some good practices which allowed them to live and minimize conflict. When the tiger disappears, the good practices also disappears. So the lifestyle changes, new ways of living comes in, and when you have success stories, tigers appears, then you have a problem, and now the reactions will be even more violent. And so if we want tiger to survive, tiger has to uh, live with this. Gradually good practices will come there. And so the thing is that we cannot go back to the old good practices because generations have moved, the lifestyle have changed. So we have to find contemporary solutions to minimize those conflicts, and we need to work on these. So the conservation model which we're going to work outside protected area has to include these aspects. We can't do it exclusively. So the way forward, if you're looking for tigers, we're looking for spaces for 40, minimum of 14 breeding females. And for me, certainly not in situation like buffer zone. Uh, we want to improve the breeding potential for uh, survival potential for breeding females. Uh, when the males are dispersing, we want males to survive and find the destiny where the breeding females are there. And the conservation benefit has to go to communities. Um, and when I say benefits, it's mainly economic benefits to generate incentives for them to participate in conservation. That's so the model which we have to do now have to look into all these aspects of it. So if you look at Madhya Pradesh in central India, if you look at so that in 2014, this is 2014 census data. If you look at the dark areas are the tiger reserves or protected areas, and the lighter red are tiger presence are there. Now, if we need to work on these, we need to go to these already where tiger is present, and inclusive conservation model. And the moment we do that, it will have the same effect of protected area effect, and then we will see a lot more red dotted in more unprotected areas. And we want this range extensions to happen. So we need, as I said, for me, three key issues which we need in new conservation model. That we want to reverse the trend of range restriction. We want to expand the tiger range. We want individual populations be viable, address the scale mismatch, demographic viable, how many breeding females. But the thing is, then um, when I talk about demography viable in 70s and 80s, when we were discussing tiger conservation or generally the conservation, there was a lot of debate about sloths, which was single large or several small. So we're looking at should we provide tigers single large spaces or several small spaces. And in the past, we didn't have, there was hardly any tiger studies. We didn't know the space requirement for tigers. So we went for large single large spaces, knowing that we're providing large spaces, but unfortunately now we know we have not provided that. So that's a kind of a failure there, but it's not intentional. It's because lack of knowledge we had. But now we need to work on it, and so maybe the chance to solve that problem is to look at several small population around those single large to create a larger connected populations. So next issue one need to look at the new conservation model has to be connected populations. So then when you're looking at connected population, then the neighboring population and its importance becomes very, very key. We have to revisit sloths, and maybe we need to recreate localized metapopulation and to address the demographic viability. So a scenario which I have created, very hypothetical scenario where you look at Panna Tiger Reserve, where you have 6 or 7 territories. If you're looking for 13 or 14 territories, there are habitats which are outside, which are not protected. So you can have these habitats where we do conservation work, not as in the same way we have done in for tiger reserves, national park, or sanctuaries, but with the people. and we can have couple of territories in one place, one territory another place, two or three in some other places, and all of a sudden, and they are within 40, 50 ranges, kilometer range. So the tiger can move in a day or in a night or maybe in a couple of nights. So reduce the movement between them, time, so the mortality is reduced. So they become connected population. Though they have independent discrete demographies, which is important, they may go extinct, they may reestablish themselves. It will make it more vigorous population. It is actually encourage increase the viability of the population. So losing tigers in these satellite population will not be a problem as long as they can be reestablished naturally. So that dynamics is very key. Once we have that, we have a larger breeding population and we can address that without increasing the size. It's a one way of addressing the issue of scale mismatch and the individual viability of our protected population. And then some of those satellite population, if we can very strategically locate um, some areas, they become the stepping stones. Some of the individuals from those satellite population can jump to those stepping stones to reach to other tiger reserves. Uh, and then all of a sudden, you create a kind of a nested metapopulation scenario. So you have created um, localized metapopulation with some small satellite habitat protecting one or two females, creating a larger breeding pool. Um, some stepping stone population help the connectivity with two different or three different localized, geographically localized metapopulation. So you have a much larger, you created a much larger connected population, and you have connected viable individual population. So but all this has to happen outside our protected areas. And so far we have in for 40 years, 4 decades, we have not able to do that. So we don't need to protect the entire corridor between Kana and Bandhavgarh, Panna to Bandhavgarh. Then you need maybe a few, two or three 200, 150 square kilometers of area. All of a sudden, this connectivity with the reduced population will become viable. So say from Panna to Kanha to Bandhavgarh is about 150 square kilometers. If you put two populations or small air conservation areas as a stepping stones, the division will become 50 kilometers. So tiger can move overnight to these population. All of a sudden, the chances of tiger moving from Panna to Kana, the probability will be much greater than it's moving 150 kilometers. It will take maybe months or weeks and get lost uh, before it finds a suitable habitat and can get killed. But when you have a stepping stone that can reduce that, so all of a sudden you can increase the connectivity. You can yeah, you can make the corridor viable. So if you look at again Madhya Pradesh scenario, the possible these are all hypothetical. There's not these yellow dots are the conservation areas which we are talking, inclusive conservation areas. So all of a sudden you see if you create that, the whole Madhya Pradesh tiger landscape can be full of tigers in 10 years time. And we have seen in Panna that how quickly tiger can recover. So it is possible. We need political will, uh, you know, and then agreement that we want to do that. And to do that, first of all, we need goodwill of the people, and that can only be generated through incentives and financial incentives when their ecology. See, the problem is that when they are struggling so much in their life to maintaining their livelihood, they don't want any additional threat to their livelihood. The tiger or any wildlife or even cheetal, sambar raid their crop, it adds to their threat, to their survival. They don't want that. They are not against tigers enough, but they don't want additional threat. And when their economies are not doing well, and they are struggling to survive, so their vision is very short term. If somebody has to cook and need fuel wood, he will go and get it because he has to do it today. He's not going to think about after 10 years when all the trees will disappear, what will he do? That he will decide and think about it once that kind of situation comes. He has to think about immediate situation. Now, if we can secure their economies and economic well-being, then they can think about future. And that's something which we need to do. If we do inclusive conservation model, that's something which we have to build on not only science, conservation, but the the benefit to communities. It has to be primary. So the major objective of the conservation model, inclusive conservation model, may not be the first criteria. The goal would be the tiger or wildlife. First goal has to be people benefit. How we can bring benefit, economic benefit to communities. Once we have done, then we can talk conservation to them. Unless it's not going to work. Sorry about that. Just give me a minute. I will have my throat is getting. So, so we have to address conflict in conservation areas, outside protected areas, and for that we need tiger presence. Without tiger presence, you can't mitigate. They talk about removing conflict is not going to help tigers. Tigers needed to manage conflict, and we have to do that, and we have to make this journey for tiger and for the people as comfortable as possible. But we need tigers to manage conflict. Without tigers, we cannot manage conflict. And if tiger is not there, then there's no we can't talk about conservation of tigers. So if you're looking tiger conservation, conflict has to be there. We have to manage, and we need. And if tiger presence will help, as far as I'm concerned, will help mitigate conflicts. Communities has to be the primary beneficiary of this conservation model. Um, it has to generate huge amount of incentives for local community for them to participate and be on our side of the conservation fence. Um, and once these incentives are with us, then we can talk about bringing in behavioral change towards conservation. And not necessarily everything has to be um, um, with the wildlife tourism, but with wildlife tourism can be a big economic drivers. If you look at wildlife tourism or nature tourism, it's I see, or for me in my head comes the Scotland model. The Scotland generates about 4 billion pounds from nature tourism without having tigers, elephants, lions, leopards, things like that. And in Madhya Pradesh, the number of tourists which comes in our protected areas to see tigers is pathetic. We're talking about 6 to 7,000 foreign tourists coming to us to see tigers. Um, it's got a lot more potential. We need to do things differently. We're not doing it right. Conservation, wildlife tourism in rules for as a conservation tool across the world, except in India. But the problem with India is that the tourism which we exist now in our protected areas, the same tourist model which we run in Agra or Delhi or Jaipur. Because you go there, select your hotel of your choice, buy a permit, go and see Taj Mahal and come out. We exactly do the same thing in our tiger reserves. You select your hotel based on your choice, buy a permit, go see tiger and come out. So the tourism has grown with market forces. It has not been designed for conservation. It was not permitted for conservation, and it has very limited, with a limited extent, participated in conservation. We need to change that because it's got a huge potential. Though it is not designed and working for conservation, it has brought in a lot of benefits to local population. But because it is not designed, so people don't see as a conservation benefits. So in the studies which we have done, I will discuss that a little later. But wildlife tourism, I think, has the potential to bring those, generate enough funds to generate incentive to part of the communities to participate with us in wildlife conservation. We don't want to see these images. The thing is that tiger is very popular species. Everyone wants to see tigers, but where they can go? We have maybe about 10 places to go and see tigers. The whole world lands up in these areas, and this is the pressure we're seeing. If we had 100 places to go and see tigers, we may not have that kind of a situation. But it is possible to do it. If we look beyond our protected areas, there are plenty of places that needs tigers, and that we need to create those. And I think we need to do that. It can generate money. It can bring benefits to communities. It can be a win-win situation for that. So I've discussed this a little bit, and then we were talking. We done a work on look at the value of wildlife tourism, and if you look at, we're done on 4 protected areas: Panna, Kanha, Bandhavgarh, and Pench, and we calculate that about 45% what it generates goes back to the economy, to local people, and which is substantial, very huge. And I think if it is targeted well and is for conservation purposes, it can really bring in a lot of incentive for local community, which it does, with the target that they participate in conservation. And so the new conservation model we're talking about in satellite habitats, um, or as a stepping stone, we need to do that. So the whatever we do, the benefit, we can increase from 45 to maybe 60%, but it's, they know that it's coming by having tigers there. So the so rough calculations which we have done, looked at the model in Africa, other places. For me, in Madhya Pradesh, we have tiger habitat about 76,000 square kilometers, 75 to 80,000 square kilometer tiger habitat. In the last census, 15,000 square kilometers, that's where the tiger is occupying. Currently, within the protected area is about 6,000 square kilometers. So there are areas where in the buffer or non-buffer areas where tiger is present, but there is no conservation happening there. And if we want to work this, take this model there, there is a potential that we can generate from somewhere between 500 to 2,000 crores um, for the local communities and in limited areas. And that can be a game changer as far as the not only tourism, because the with the number of fixed carrying capacity in tiger reserve, the growth of wildlife tourism is limited, and that's where we should look forward to, that how we can grow tourism, bring in benefit to local community, and let them, and then they participate in conservation. And if you look at what can happen, outcome of these models is listed here. We can address most of the problems and issues which we saw protected areas not able to do it, because it's all to do with outside protected areas. By using this model, we can address that very effectively. So, David, I think I stop it here, and maybe
Okay, sir.
when you can, if there are questions.
I'll just open the
If,
chat box. So those who have any questions, they can ask questions. Thank you so much, sir. It was wonderful presentation.
I hope everybody was able to listen to me.
Yeah. Is everyone able to? Okay, some questions coming in. Do you want me to read out the questions, or can you see?
Yeah. Let me see if I can. Yeah, you better you read it out so that, and the name of the person, and so I can address to him.
Okay. Okay, I think the first question from Sharath. In 2018 Tiger estimation, the numbers have gone up 33%. MP especially has seen a jump of 140% from 308 to 526. What is your opinion about such big jump? We know that it's several tigers are even counted. Do you think such sudden jump result complaints you on the park managers?
See, I have no access to the details of the data, so I don't know how much I can talk about it. But as I generally explained, whether there is a jump, we were only talking about based on their numbers, and believing that they are correct, then there is a jump, and 30% is a huge jump. So that's something to be, they must be congratulated. But despite my skepticism about the numbers, one thing which I'm really very excited about is that almost every tiger habitat, whether protected or non-protected, is been reports of tiger presence. Gujarat has a turn up in Khargon, Vidisha, Devas, all those places in Madhya Pradesh, and not only Madhya Pradesh, right, even in uh, Maharashtra, Karnataka, every other places, and that's a very encouraging sign, because tiger is able to survive, move those distances. So I'm not so much excited about the numbers, but these are signs that we have to take advantage of. These are success stories. These are things which we need to build on. We can't just say that we have enough tigers and then that's all, because I don't think that our protected area has done enough to be sit and relax. I think we need to work on, and these are some of the signs I'm really excited about, that it gives us opportunity to take advantage of them.
Okay, thank you, sir. The next question about the surplus tigers. Why can't we proactively relocate surplus tigers from the source population like Nagarhole, Bandipur to habitats which are suitable? I think the same in Sharatoli.
There will never be a surplus population. I don't think this carrying capacity and and surplus thing comes up. There is never a surplus individual tigers. What happens is that, even say in Panna, you have only 10 tigers. As long as there's 10 tigers breeding, some tigers will be dispersing. You have 40 tigers, there will be more tigers dispersing. So what is a surplus? I don't know. It's very difficult for me to explain, because there may be, say, 3 breeding females, is a space for 8 females, but there will dispersal of females and males. Both will be happening in that kind of situation. So there is no.
Sorry to butt in, sir. I think we all read an article from Dr. Ullas Karanth. It was about Wayanad population. In 380 square kilometer, there was around 80 tigers. So if you calculate, it comes to around 4 square kilometer, there was a tiger. So when the people asked, I think he's the one who mentioned it's actually a surplus population.
That's to explain to layman, he made a, but because it's a density dependent population, the animal will move out when you have surplus population or not surplus population. So and the animal will go. So what we need to do is that we have to provide a conservation scenario where those dispersing individuals survive better and able to find breeding spaces, territories, and that's what we need to do. But look, using this surplus individual as taking in helicopter dropping somewhere may not be the best idea.
I think Dr. Ravichalam also replied to that question. I worry when there is intervening too much, very limited understanding. Translocation cannot not be a solution for conflict. I think you also mentioned the same.
No, I've not understood. What come again?
And the same what you explained, sir. It shouldn't be a translocation shouldn't be a solution for this.
Yeah, no, we are very proud of India, the Forest Department, whatever they have done, that we very religiously pursue that not to fence our protected areas. It's an enormous challenge. It's the easiest solution, and translocation is now happening. That is looking at an easier solution for our conservation issues. But it's a hard journey. It's a difficult one. But I think I agree with Ravi that it's not the best solution. It's maybe the easiest solution, but it's not the best solution. And I think we are very proud that we have national park and sanctuaries in as natural way without fence, and we are managing them. We need to do more to feel better about it. But these are kind of things are very easy cheat solutions, and I don't think it can be done in an extreme situation like we did it for Chariska or Panna.
Okay, sir. Another question from Vibhav Srivastava about river linking Ken Betua. Your opinion? What's your opinion?
Opinion is very, very.
It's a big question. Let me read.
There is no
Large,
brain.
okay, sir. He written like large area of Panna is going to submerge to link Ken and Betwa River and Ranipur Wildlife Sanctuary in UP has been proposed to add Panna Tiger Reserve. Ranipur is part of Kaimur landscape, which is thought not to well but connected to Kaimur Wildlife Sanctuary in Bihar. The Kaimur Wildlife Sanctuary is proposed tiger reserve and recently a tiger camera trap. What is your opinion? Does adding Ranipur Wildlife Sanctuary to Panna Tiger Reserve help the tigers to regain their lost land and nullify the impact of river linking?
I really very sad when I hear this from my old colleagues from WII suggesting these things. These are bribes, I would say, to get this dam going. First, you destroy this, and then you say you can mitigate this problem somewhere else, and which are not the ideal solutions. And I think they should be condemned about this. And I'm very, very angry that WII is party to that kind of proposals. I think it shouldn't be done like that.
Okay, sir. Next question from Belinda. In dry habitat, does prey density play a major part in the size of a tiger home range?
It does everywhere, but you know, you have a what you call a metabolic requirement of tigers, and once that requirement is fulfilled, you can increase the number of prey, and tiger range will not go. So when you have a low prey base, maybe there will be tiger range will be larger, but as the prey increases. But once you have more than enough prey in an area and you double the number, hoping the tiger range will decrease twice, it will not happen. So then, like in case of so when you look at prey density and tiger densities in most of the good protected areas, we don't see a relationship between the range, tiger range, home ranges sizes and the prey densities. And but if you see from a very low density to high density, then you may be able to see. So it will be a curve which will go up and then flatten out as the prey density will go up, but tiger range will not go up. So in some areas, yes, it will have an impact, but where you have more than enough prey, after that it will not. So Panna, we had more than enough prey.
Okay. There's a next question is very interesting, and I'm eager to listen to that answer. From Panchami Menon, do you think that it's better to give sole power to the NTCA to declare a wildlife sanctuary as a tiger reserve instead of the decentralized model where the power of making recommendation is given to the state? For instance, Kerala is not supporting declaration of Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary as a tiger reserve, even when NTCA repeatedly asked Kerala CCF to send a recommendation.
The initial part was I lost it because the sound was kind of disturbed. So you were asking that the state should have the power to declare tiger reserves, eh?
Yeah, or NTCA should have the sole power.
It's very difficult situation. It changes so much with the state who is in power. Sometimes states are good, so good leadership. You want like to have that power with that regime, but sometimes it's not so. So then it's very difficult. I think it's a concurrent subject. So right now we will go with it. But why we want to do that? As far as I'm concerned, I think we need now is the time when we started protected area network model. It's the time we need to look for other conservation model, and we should work on that. And outside protected areas, maybe we will be more successful without creating protected areas. Those are exclusive models. We work with people. We can find ways to work with people. If we can't work with our own species, then who else we can work with?
Okay. Thank you. Sir, next question from Kaustubh Sharma. Sir, how are you dealing with the sudden loss of revenue flow, and what has been your contingency plan? Only important for families who are totally dependent, but also for business who are laying off staff due to poor planning.
No, so not understood the lose business revenue for who? For me or
I
local
think for
community?
probably for the all the local community.
Well, so what we're looking at is that initially we thought that when we going for an exclusive model and looking at revenue generation for communities, we thought, say, in an area where we're working, we're looking at communities in this village. The major source of income is from the use of grazing. So they use their livestock there, buffaloes, and they earn 60, 70 lakhs from there. So this buffalo economy is huge. Now, if you want to do a conservation in that area, we need to replace that 60, 70 lakhs for the villages. Now, in current COVID situation, like it can happen anytime, and if they are entirely dependent on tourism, then what will we do in situation like this? So we're looking at model where we're not going to replace the existing ways of living and completely, but these models, these revenues add on to those revenues which they have and reduce the impact of those existing revenue generation activities they have. So we need to do that to make it more sustainable.
Okay, sir. Another question from Karan Moti.
Mhm.
Can you help with a guideline or a rule book for what large operators can do and how to be more towards the community driven tourism model?
So it is very hard for us as I'm a tour operator, lodge owner myself. I mean the tourism myself. For me to do very little in conservation directly, um, it has to. So because the way the tourism is set up, but we can work with communities in areas, and it has to start with charity, and then we have to be a little very careful what is charity and what is conservation. Sometimes there is a blur area between what is charity and what. So the charity is very important because it's a building block of the conservation. So you have to do a lot of charity work in those surrounding areas, and we can do that. We can bring in funds and interest from our clients. So and then build conservation ethics on those charity work which we do. So I think we can start with charity. It's a good thing which we're doing. We have to do it, but we have to build a building on it, which is a conservation building on those bases.
Okay, sir. Varun Mathur is asking, what do you think is the first step to build these smaller protected area outside protected areas?
Sorry,
And
sorry, sorry.
what do you think is the first step to build these smaller protected areas outside PA? And what, in your point, is the way to start?
No. So they are not protected areas. First of all, we're not creating protected areas. These are conservation areas. So and the idea is to create the primary beneficiary are the communities, and we need to generate money for them, incentives for them to participate, be interested in it. That's the idea. Is that he was asking or
Yeah,
not?
I think that was the.
Or he
Okay,
can
sir.
send me an email later.
Yeah, Varun. Yeah. Next question from Sujita Dakkal. I want to know about your perspective on transboundary conservation initiative between India and Nepal. How can it be promoted?
Very important, like Valmiki Tiger Reserves, Dudhwa, very crucial, because sometimes the connectivity of between two protected areas through other side of the country, and I think that those are very crucial.
Okay. Another question from Aditya Das. After what period the title Tiger Reserve is uplifted if there are no sightings of tigers for consecutive years in rows?
I don't think they will uplift it. See, it's a conservation program. So if tiger is not there, we have lost it. Doesn't mean we have lost the area. We can restore it if we can. If it's not, is still a natural area. We can it can have leopards, it can have wild animals, it can have nature, and we can still protect it. Yeah, I don't think we should.
Another question from Siddharth Inwale. Sir, do you think with such rigid rules and regulation regarding wildlife, is it possible to create such a model where local people can make a model of nature tourism in outside protected areas?
We can do it. We need political will. We need openness of our the forest department is the largest land manager, owns most of manages most of the tiger habitat, and I think they have to open up their arms, not to keep everybody away from that space, but to join hands with people. Because if you look at where is the knowledge is, where is the expertise is, where is the money is. If you look at it, quite a lot is outside the system. Of course, system has got a lot of experience, a lot of money, what they're doing, but there is a lot which is outside. If you look at a lot of research that has been done by organization which is outside the system, individuals, NGOs, they have published papers, they have developed knowledge about it. There's a lot of people who have made money, have interest in wildlife. There is a lot of passionate people who are there outside, and they are not participating very actively in conservation. And so we want forest department to open their hand, open their arms to hold their hands and bring them into the conservation action.
Okay, sir. There's a lot of questions are piling up, so I'll choose some of them in between. Sir.
Yeah.
Reason for a large requirement in dry forest, food availability, is it Sham Kate?
Sorry.
Reason for a large range requirement in dry forest, is it a food availability?
I don't know much about it. We found there is a large range sizes of tigers. We didn't have long enough studies to understand the nitty-gritty of why that is the case. But prey was not, as far as I am concerned. But there could be various other reasons. The pinch period, summertime, lot of habitat is not used by tigers because it's not the best areas. Too hot. Tiger want to cool itself. It's a large carnivore. So it needs habitats which may be spread out for summertime. So it needed larger spaces. We know very little about tigers.
Okay, sir. Okay, another question from Punacha Nandi. Is cattle population in India a huge problem in terms of damage to tiger habitat?
Yes, it is. And there is no animal husbandry in India. There are free-ranging animals, and that's something we need to build. I mean, we're doing this conservation model. That's something. Animal husbandry will be a big department to work with us, because that's going to solve the problem. Imagine those livestock removed within 2 monsoons, the habitat will come back, and animal will be out in the open. And so it's big part of our conservation will be animal husbandry.
Okay. Sujan not put up an interesting statement. I'm still at an amazement that with the 1.3 billion people, we still have such a huge number of large mammals still grazing our land, unlike our neighbor countries, which doesn't have much left. Do you want to add anything to that?
No. We have a lot to learn from our neighbors. Bangladesh conservation, tiger conservation, we have a lot to learn. Amazing work they have done. And look at Bhutan, they're way ahead. And the community participation work up in the Himalayas, up in the plains. Nepal is way ahead of India. Sri Lanka has done very well. And even Pakistan, you will be surprised what they have done. You have to go and search and find out. The Makhor conservation, it's just as an example. It's a cultural thing. There is based on hunting, but it works. And and it's very successful program. I think our neighboring countries have done very well.
Okay, sir. Next question from Amol. How can common people help in overall conservation for tigers in India?
How?
How can common people help in the overall conservation for tigers in India?
It's a it's a huge problem. That's why I'm saying that a lot of passionate people who wants to go and work. I had a discussion with one of the forest officers. You always criticize what to do, and I said no, field director, and I will tell you what, because it's for me, being a field director is the easiest of the job, because I don't have to do any work. If I have to do patrolling, hundreds of people will come. I will be breaking my head deciding who I will use, who is the best, who is not the best. If I want a management plan to be done, one of the world's the best brains in the world will come and do a management plan for me. If I have to do research, they will come with their funds and do it for me. If I have to do community work, people will come and do it for me. Animal, you name. I don't have to do any work. I have to just open my arms.
Okay. Okay, sir. Another question from Dilip. That's an interesting question. No, the Ritikas. With the several small protected area model, work for the other wildlife species as well. Example, elephants, because they need a larger areas, isn't it?
They just come again. I just sometimes the sound disappears, so I miss part of it.
Will the several small protected area model work for the other wildlife species as well? Elephants, example.
Yeah, many more, especially large ranging animals. Tiger is much easier. Elephants are much more difficult animal to do work for. I think a lot more challenges. Conflict is different kind. It's much more difficult. But yes, this model can work for many different species.
Okay. Another, what's the future of Sundarban tigers with the rising water levels? Very low prey base.
I never been to Sundarban, so I have very little experience. It's very unfortunate. In a tiger habitat I had never been to. I would like to go, and once I've been there, then maybe I will have something to say about it. But right now, I don't think I know much to even say a word about it.
Okay. Another question: is there any scope of having tiger-based private game reserves in India?
Sorry, tiger?
Tiger-based private game reserves in India.
Why not? I have no problem with private NGO, public, anything. The thing is, as long as it works for conservation, that's the and it works for the community. It has to work for the community. That's the primary goal. If somebody makes money, it's okay. But as long as that a substantial part of it is shared with local community, I'm with that. So anything except hunting, I'm quite okay with.
Okay. Sir, if you can just put your email ID in the chat, that would be helpful. There's a lot of questions are coming out.
Okay.
So those who have any questions, you can please directly contact him. I think Kaustu Sharma and all had some more questions I couldn't read out. It's caught in between somewhere.
So is it Raghu? R is not capital. It's done it on its own. So Raghu.Bhawan. Can you see it?
No, sir. If anyone can see the, I think no, sir.
Acha, it went only to Karan Modi. Just me. Let me see.
Everyone watching.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I will have to.
Yes, yeah, got it. Thank you. Anyway, thank you so much, sir, for a wonderful session. We'll
thank you very much.
Come back with a snow leopard session. I mean, we would love to learn a lot. And on behalf of Kottayam Nature Society and Alleppey Naturalistic Society, we extend our gratitude.
Thank you very much. And
thank you, all of you. Yeah.
I will be quite happy to, if you have doing again, then maybe Ladakh. That will be my favorite subject.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And thank you all of you who attended. Stay safe and stay healthy. Good night, all of you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.